to begin.
Hey, what's up? You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, broadcasting live on your FM dial and streaming on KQBHLA.com. You're listening to The Social Primate. I'm your host, Eddie Aguirre, and today we have the one and only, the great Luis Cornejo.
Hi, good morning, Eddie. Thank you for having me on the show.
Luis, thank you. It's an honor to have you on the show. I had mentioned to you that I came across your work through LA Public Press with a conversation with Mariah about a month ago at this point. And honestly, I thought it was a powerful conversation, and I feel like it encompassed a lot of the emotions that we were going through, at least for the first month of 2025.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, when you said that, my brain almost went like, wait, how long ago was this? And I think January felt so long that I still kind of look at my calendar sometimes and I'm like, are we in February? Are we? It's almost like it's not real, because I think that, especially, the first 2-3 weeks were so intense, like you said, right? So many of us were experiencing strong emotions and just kind of cope with the state of the world. And, here we are in February, and I definitely have seen a shift from the worry and the fear to the rage growing, to people just building community and getting out there and speaking on these things. So it's been such a powerful, I think, observation to see the beginning of the year to this month being I feel like this is the official start of the year for a lot of people.
You know what? Right now that you mentioned that, it actually kind of made me start kind of processing what the last month has been. You mentioned that it started off with anxiety, but I think from when it first started, we've been able to kind of take a step back and try to process what's going on, and we're trying to make those emotions that what we have going on into something actionable and in a air quote positive. I was a part of the protest happening in LA. The energy, the fact that everybody was there collectively united for a cause, it was so powerful to be there.
Yeah, no, it's inspiring. And to be honest, I think that we have to normalize when things like this happen, especially the fires in LA and, the transition in the presidency and the new year, which already comes with so many mixed emotions to begin with on a regular year. It's normal, right, for all of us to have a reaction to it. And I think many people were in crisis mode. They were experiencing the very difficult parts of going through loss and grief, right, which was realizing that there was a almost like a transition, right? And nobody really likes transitions. Most of the time they're very difficult because it means having to adjust and trust yourself and having to go through the feelings, right, that come with it. And so I think to see now how so many people were able to be in their feelings, express them, and then start to use them as fuel, right? And I talk a lot about rage, especially recently, because that was the one thing that kept coming up for me in my sessions with my clients was I feel so much rage. I feel so much anger. And as soon as they said it, the quick, almost automatic was, but I know I shouldn't. That's not a good thing. I shouldn't be angry. I should be grateful. And I'd be like, no, I'm be angry. Let's talk about it. And just seeing them share it and even cry, or just from the frustration, was a reminder that many of us, especially folks of color, and queer folks, get told that we need to tone it down, that we're exaggerating, that we're being dramatic, that it's not that bad. All of these things, especially when we're angry. And the truth is, we have lots of reasons to be angry right now. And I think that many of us, we are working through that complexity of really sitting with our emotions and being okay with being angry and being pissed and figuring out, how do I use this, right? Because in the work that I do, I often tell people, rage and anger are super powerful. They are symbolic emotions that basically indicate injustice or something that's threatening to us, doesn't feel right. And the real aspect of it is that it can be destructive, right? You can definitely, it's like fire, right? Anger can be like fire. It can destroy, it can consume you, or it could be constructive, right? You can use it as a catalyst. You can use it as energy to really help you in directing you in movement. And that's what we're seeing right now, is so many people stepping out of their comfort zone, so many people speaking up, so many people showing up for our communities, and and just being together. And like you said, it's very powerful, right, when we get together and we see each other, because we're all coming from different walks of life. We all have different experiences, but we do share some commonalities, and those are very powerful, and I think very important as well for so many of us, right? The fact that we live in a country that does not value or appreciate us as people, to be quite honest. And aside from that, even for folks like me who are citizens and who are firstborns, first generation, we still experience secondary trauma from a lot of this. I saw my parents, who were undocumented for many, many years, go through fear and anxiety and depression because they had to hide, and they felt like they weren't really important in this country. And yet they were extremely hardworking and so dedicated and committed, and they loved this country. And to watch them almost feel like be in this, I would say almost like abusive relationship with this country, it affected me, because I was often the one that had to hear about, we can't go here. No, we can't do that. No, we can't travel. Hey, when they ask you, you say you're born here. Remember that. Would only speak English if you're around these people. You can speak Spanish at home. Lots of these little messages that, like, people who don't have to worry about it don't hear them. And so I think that in that sense, we're all connected, right? Whether we are first generation, second generation, we came from folks who not only immigrated to this country and around the region, but who are originally from these places. So it's a lot to unpack, and I think so many of us are new sometimes to really experiencing these range of emotions because we were not taught how to really sit with them. We're taught to avoid, we're taught to minimize, we're taught to ignore rather than actually sit through the emotions. And so I talk a lot about this, in my work and my podcast, but also social media, because I really want people to understand and feel that they have access to this type of knowledge, right? So that they're not feeling like there's something wrong with them. But the reality is that no, these are natural responses that we get in a world that often tries to shut us down. I incorporate a lot of talks about, like, for example, spiritual bypassing as well, right? Many of us come from religious homes. We've all heard ponte a orar, start praying or talk to God or trust in God. And oftentimes that's also used as a way to avoid talking about really difficult things. So, like I said, it's not so much that our communities don't want to talk about it. It's not so much that they don't see it as important. It's that we're not taught how to do it. And instead we're taught how to survive, because that is the reality, that we've had to do it. We've had to survive. And so our parents don't teach us how to slow down and sit with emotions because they didn't get that chance. So they're telling us, you push through and keep going, because that's what they've had to do. And yet it does come with a lot of unfortunate, things like mental health issues, trauma, ruptured relationships, right, with family members, and a lot of other things. So, sorry, internet show you asked.
No,
it's a lot.
But it's interesting to hear this because there, like you said, there's so much to unpack, right? Like a lot of the times it's generational things that we don't even understand for the most part. And then on top of that, to have this pressure to act normal when things are all these things are happening, like that only is going to continue to be a negative take on a conversation that we should have more broadly. And again, I think that's one of the things that, at least for myself, I felt over the course of the month. Like when the wildfires were going on, like I felt hopeless. I felt guilt that I had to still go to work, but in the back of my head, I'm worried about what's going on, And then like, okay, well, act normal, move past it. And like, what does that, what does that do to the person?
Yeah, absolutely. You're not alone. I felt the same way too. I know lots and lots of people that felt that way. Like we were supposed to pretend like it was business as usual and you just go on with your day while you're hearing so many things going on at once. And especially because of social media now, we're so interconnected that there's no turning it off. I mean, turning it off in the sense of us disconnecting and being intentional, yes, but turning it off in the sense of it's going to stop and someone's going to slow it down. It's like, no, the world just has so much going on. And so I think that's the other portion of, our own self-awareness and having insight around these things is how do we also normalize that, no, we're not supposed to be okay and go business as usual, because we're not machines and we're not robots and we're impacted by these things on the daily. I'm not saying shut down. I'm not saying that, people should be depressed. What I'm saying is you shouldn't also feel like you should be okay 100%. And you also shouldn't feel like things don't matter when they do. I tell people, feeling your emotions, which I think this is actually a big misconception for a lot of folks. They think that if they feel them, something bad is going to happen. Yeah. If I feel sad, I'm going to get depressed. If I feel angry, I'm going to do something bad. If I feel lonely, I'm going to make, wrong choices. And I tell people there's a big difference between feeling and action, right? We're all responsible. We should all be accountable about our actions, how we engage with these feelings. But just sitting with our feelings and acknowledging them is very different. It's really just recognizing that something is showing up in our bodies and it's representative of something. I often tell folks, feelings don't just come up because we're crazy. They're real and they're indicators. Like, we are hardwired. And part of our survival has depended on our emotions and being able to discern between danger and also something that's safe and also something that is, curious to us because we might not understand it. And so that is what emotions are. They're really tools. We just don't know how to use them most of the time.
Yeah, that's early on in my maybe like high school, I'd probably say my early college days. I started kind of understanding that, I think a lot of our society can benefit from having some sort of access to the ability to educate ourselves on our emotions, because I think a lot of the times, when you think about it growing up, you're just really reacting to the things around you until you take a step back to try to really like self-reflect and say, wait a second, why am I feeling this? Like, what's triggering this within me? And I think that comes within with time, I would say, because I don't think any of us start off knowing this playbook.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We don't. And, the reality is that we're dependent on each other. That's why we're social creatures. We're hardwired to survive through other people, right? Like when we're babies, we can't survive if our parents or caregivers don't take care of us. We won't make it. We're fully dependent on others to learn, to survive. And so we have to be taught these things. We are already programmed. I say program. I always use this because I think sometimes people, it's a little bit easier if they understand it from a computer or technology aspect. But we are programmed, right, in the sense that our brain understands about survival. It understands about emotions. It understands what sensations feel like. That's why when we touch people, we feel, right, our skin is able to really detect people, right? It detects things. And we start doing that from the get-go. I don't know if you've ever seen babies when they are exploring and they're first starting to crawl, they put everything in their mouth. Yeah. Because they want to know texture. They want to understand, what does that feel like? What is this? They're curious. And I actually spent quite a few years of my career earlier on working in child development center. So my background, my undergrad anyway, is in child and adolescent development. So I spent a lot of years and time observing babies, observing children, and understanding how we develop as humans. And those are pivotal years. And like you said, of course, they're dependent on us teaching them. And I remember, in a lot of these places, because they were education-based, and also one of them was at UCLA, there was a lot of emphasis on teaching about emotions, and and oftentimes it was not stuff that was accessible to a lot of our communities, right? Like you didn't get that. And so I know I grew up never having anyone talk to me about my feelings. I actually got told to, you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't be sad, ponte feliz, like, why are you, be happy, why are you so angry, blah blah blah, you should be grateful. And it was always the same thing, right? Especially from adults who didn't want to really deal with the emotion. And so for them, it was easier to just say, don't feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think in anything, it's easier to avoid it, like anything that's in your outside of your comfort zone is immediately like a big no-no, like you're good where you are, you're getting through, that's all that matters.
It's uncomfortable. Like you said, it's a discomfort, right? It's something that we as a society have learned to do really, really well is to avoid discomfort. We don't like to feel uncomfortable. I know I don't. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a pro at this. I still get nervous. I get anxious. I still move around a lot. I do a lot of things because I know for me it can be overstimulating, just like it is for so many other people. And so it is hard. but it's something that you practice. It's like when we all say, you know, go to the gym and you start lifting or you start running, you get better, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing when you're talking about emotions, when you're talking about your thoughts. There's mental, emotional exercises that you do and you put into practice and play to really grow those aspects, right? You mentioned, I think, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is really an understanding of how our emotions and other people's emotions come into play and impact one another. And so it's really about empathy. It's really about understanding others aside from ourselves. And so it's very complex stuff. And I think that, you know, a lot of people often get very uncomfortable with that idea because it does require vulnerability. And oftentimes it does require us to put down our defenses. And so, you know, I think for our community, especially because we've had to navigate so many things from the get-go, there's often a real fear around slowing down because it might mean that we won't make it, that we won't survive, that something might happen. And yet the real reason we have survived is because we have been together. We have supported one another. You know, I've seen even, like, for example, I was talking about my parents last week with someone, and I was saying, you know, I noticed that they avoided a lot. They didn't talk about a lot of these things to me, right? Or I never heard it. But what I did see was that they had people that were there for them, people that were supportive. And so in some way, they still got some of those needs met, right? They still had some of those moments where they were able to really process these things. But I think it wasn't normalized enough, right? It wasn't something that you did, right? We often get told, like, don't talk about your problems, right? Don't talk about the things going on. And I completely understand that. I think, you know, there's two sides or more sides to things, you know, than we like to think, because things are a lot more complicated. And obviously you have to find people that are trustworthy. Obviously you have to make sure it's the right time, right? Yeah. The right place, the right way to reflect on these things. But what I'm getting at is that avoiding it or also minimizing it or keeping it pushed down is also not going to help.
Yeah, so. No, I agree. You know, and I have a short personal story on my end from a couple of days ago. You know, going back to the whole the heavy month that we've been going through. You know, I've been going through some changes, you know, through work, just to the goals that I'm trying to set on myself, and then seeing the obstacles that are in my way. And a couple of days ago, I don't know, I was not feeling myself. I was feeling like very down, like just void. I'm not even sad. It just felt empty. Yeah. And I kind of started trying to like figure out what was going on and what was causing these little things to accumulate. And I came to the realization that I had just been pushing things down. Yeah. You know, and when I started thinking about that, I'm even getting them now. I started getting like goosebumps, and I started feeling my chest swell up, and then my eyes swell up. And then I started tearing up a bit, you know, and then I realized like, as soon as it started happening, I tried pushing it back down. I was like, no, I got this. Like, there's no reason to go through this. But then I was like, nah, you know, I need to talk about it. I need to voice this. And, you know, I was able to talk to my partner about some of the concerns that I had. And even then I felt very vulnerable just saying it because I felt like I was showing weakness, you know? And even now I was still thinking like, man, maybe I shared too much, you know? And like, I don't know. I felt this type of way about it. But I realized that regardless, like I needed to do it for myself, you know, and that was going to feel that weight lift off of me by being able to express it. Yeah.
And it's a whole process. I mean, everything you just explained right now, I hear it all the time from my clients, and I have so much empathy for people because I know it's not easy. You know, even for me who does this for work, I struggle with it too. You know, I have to literally be very intentional and very much honest with myself sometimes and be like, Luis, like, what is going on? Because the instinct is to push it down. And the funny thing is, you were mentioning the psychosomatic aspect of it, right? Which is the physical response that we often feel. The body's not like the mind. The mind, we can be like, okay, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to get on TikTok. The body is like, no, you're feeling it, you know, because I've actually talked to folks who tell me that they feel anxiety in their body. It's not often the thoughts that get them. It's the fact that their heart rate's going up, and it's the fact that they're getting sweaty. It's the fact that like their chest gets tight because their body knows what we're going through. It's also hardwired to understand the emotions. I mean, they work hand in hand. They're not separate. So, you know, as you were describing that, I was thinking so much about how even when we talk about expressing our feelings, it's so just deep rooted in us to have all of these barriers to access these things, right? Even our gender, right? When we talk about men, women, non-binary folks, I mean, all of us have been exposed to really these concepts around what is appropriate and what isn't based on how we identify, and also what is acceptable. And for a lot of men, especially men of color, they're often told, you can't be sad, you can't be emotional, you have to be strong. And so a lot of them are taught to be stoic, which is like very serious. And I know I met many men in my life who have been very like, you can't tell their poker faces on, right? And it's because that's how they were taught to respond to things. And even when sharing, it's often discouraged to share. I've known many men who struggle having deeper relationships with other men because they don't really know how to express themselves with them. And I think that there's a lot of shame that gets embodied into people, and also a lot of guilt around the idea that if we share, that means that we're going to cause someone else harm. We're going to put our problems on someone else. And I often tell people, the reality is not that you're seeking the answer. Most people can't give us an answer. What they can give us is support, love, attention, a moment, to be there present with us. But they oftentimes, I would say most people when they speak, they don't want like a solution. They just want to feel like people see them, like they're being validated, like, they're being acknowledged. And I've been in that same space that you just shared, moments where I have so many things that I have to do, so many things on my plate, and I feel very disconnected, or I feel very down and negative, and I start to wonder, like, why do people even want to listen to me? Like, why am I even doing this? Like, the world has so much going on, and like my whole body just like sinks. And that's when I tell myself now, which was not the same years ago, where I'm like, okay, no, I need to step back. I need to take care of myself. I need to sleep more. I need to get off social media. I need to reach out to my friends. I need to, go out to dinner with my partner. I need to remind myself that I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. I need to remind myself that there's an intention for why I even put myself and push myself in this direction. And at the same time, I'm not on anyone's timeline. I'm not trying to get to a place. Important. Yeah, it's an important reminder, because we set unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And when I say unrealistic, it's not because things are not possible for us, but it's because we expect to do it in very unrealistic ways, right? I'm going to do this by tomorrow, or I'm going to be here by next year, rather than actually appreciating the growth and the movement that we make, right? We focus on this idea that unless we see the big prize, it wasn't worth it. And that's not how things work, because none of us wake up and are already where we want. We have to get up and do that work, and that takes emotional, physical, mental labor. And I think we need to appreciate and also give ourselves a pat on the back here and there. I also don't think we're taught to do that. I know I wasn't.
Yeah, no. I agree. No, same.
Yeah, most of our parents and people didn't say, appreciate yourself, love yourself, congratulate. They were like, be humble. No say, don't be this, don't be humble. And I'm why? Like, we have to get up every day and survive and do all of these things, and then it's just because it's expected. It's like, no, like, this is really about us acknowledging that being human and being alive is extremely complicated, is extremely challenging, and it's exhausting. And so we don't have to be alive the way that other people tell us. We can be alive in our own way, where I'm like, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to go read a book, go to the petting zoo. I mean, I say petting zoo because I love animals. So I always think of like animals when I need to like disconnect. I'll play with my dogs. I'll, go to the zoo. I like going to the museum, the Natural History Museum in downtown LA. And I just like to disconnect and read about animals. And to me, that helps me, because it reminds me, like, you're not the only thing in the world. There's so many other beautiful living creatures. There's so much out there. And it's not that I'm letting go of my humanity or forgetting. It's that I'm telling myself, like, okay, yeah, you got all this going on. There's a lot going on in the world. And also, there's so many beautiful things that have nothing to do with you. It's okay.
No, you mentioned a bunch of great points right now. One of them being, earlier on the conversation, you were saying that sometimes you just need to allow yourself to listen. Like, you don't necessarily have to take people's advice, but you should allow yourself at least the opportunity to acknowledge it and see how you can implement parts of it into your being, And I think you kind of touched base on that. On the last episode that I heard, of your podcast, the Rage One, I think something along the lines that says, don't be influenced, be inspired to figure it out for yourself. You know, and I thought that was such great advice, because at the end of the day, you know, our stories are going to feed other people's experiences. But obviously not everything is going to fall in line with what the experience is. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that we can't take lessons from that.
Exactly. You know, my mom taught me that, actually. And it's funny. And I think it's funny because it came from a lot of frustration that she used to tell me things and I would get really upset. You know, like, I mean, it's very normal, right? I think most of us, like, we don't like to hear it from our parents when we're adults. And they're like giving us advice, right?
Yeah.
And she said something to me once that I think that's kind of what helped me a lot, of like the perspective that I hold, where she was like, look, mijo, I'm going to tell you these things. You don't have to listen to them. It's just my advice from my experience. If it works for you, if it does help, good. And if it doesn't, then, you know, I may not know what I'm talking about because it may not have anything to do with you. And I was like, wow, like that was actually like a very powerful moment with my mom, because, you know, she's often someone that's very strong, and so she's not the kind of person to say, like, you know, if it works. She's kind of person to be like, no, this is it and this is it. So when she said that to me, I was like, oh, I'm like, okay. I'm like, thanks, Mom. And then from there on, she would remind me. And I think for me, the reason why that was so important is because it reminded me that we don't all have the same experience. We may have similarities, just like you said, but the important thing here is that we're not going to find other people and be like, oh, that's the answer, because they're not in our shoes. They're not living our lives, and they're not even living in our bodies. In that, you know, it's just not realistic. I think what I often push on is we can be inspired, we can be encouraged, we can be empowered through others, because we are, like I said, we're social creatures, while at the same time reminding ourselves that we have to do it our way, and we also have to trust in ourselves. And so that's where that almost duality comes in, right? Of having to be, you know, individual in the movement that we're trying to get to, but also collective in the fact that we have community, and those are both okay. You know, I think when we move away from binary systems, right, of this or that, or yes or no, black and white, right and wrong, we start to understand things in a lot more color, right, and variation, and start to be more self-aware that, you know, we don't live other people's lives or experiences. We live our own, and that's what we have control over. And yes, it affects other people, and that's why I said the collective, because we also have to be very, it's like I said, it's really hard work. It's a lot when you're thinking about it. Well, at the same time, you know, my push has always been, I don't want people to see me, and I put this even on my social media, I don't want people to see me and be like, oh my gosh, he's an influencer, oh my gosh, Luis is doing this or lives this way. I tell people, look, if you're inspired by something, whether it's wanting to be more expressive of yourself, whether it is wanting to you know, show up in the world a certain way, whether it is, you know, something, right, then great, that's wonderful. Take that, use it for yourself. What does it say to you? And get out there and do that for yourself, right? Because I don't believe that we really have leaders in that context. I think, and this is more of my thinking that has been shifting in the last few years, is that we're not looking for individuals. We are looking for collective. We're looking for people, because movements don't happen because of one person. They happen because of the community, because of people. Right. And so rather than, you know, us looking at someone and thinking that they're going to fit all of these like needs that we have, it's very unrealistic, right? I'm going to fail people. I know I've failed people. I know I'm human. I know I'm messy. I know that I don't always say the right thing. And so I tell people, it's not about you looking at me and being like, oh my gosh, Luis has all the answers. Luis knows all this stuff because he does this, and this, and he added this title. It's more of like, I'm sharing with you because I want you to see that we're not perfect. It's unrealistic for us to expect something out of ourselves that we're not going to get from somebody else either. So how do we normalize and humanize ourselves? And, you know, even as you were sharing your story, like I said, I felt that way too. I have tools. I've done this work for years, and I still get really, really sad. I get depressed. I go through anxiety attacks. You know, I take medication. I go to therapy. You know, I still have to like disconnect from people. I still have people who hate me. All of these things, you know, and and it's like at the end of the day that I'm not preaching or teaching people how to like be perfect, you know. And I often get that people come in, they're like, Luis, I need you to fix me, and that's the first thing they say to me. And I look at them like, there is nothing to fix. And if that, you know, if that's the thought you're coming in with, let's talk about how I can support you. You know, we go over this, and then it's like I see them later, and they're like, you know, we worked together a few years, and some of my clients, and they go like, you know what, Luis, you taught me that I had this ability to do this, and I just needed someone to be there with me. And to me, like, I'm going to get emotional. It's so special because I think that's what we forget, that we either lean on the individualistic where I have to figure it out, I have to deal with this, I have to blah, 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 that we disconnect and close off to people. Or we go on the other side where we expect other people to do it for us instead of seeing that these things go hand in hand. They're complementary to each other. I need to do the individual work, and then I also have people who love me and care about me. How do I grow from this?
Dang, that really resonated with me there, because again, it feels like this is my own personal therapy session here, but
I love it. I'll send you the bill.
It's fun. It's interesting to me because, at the end of the day, at least for myself, I feel like for such a long time, like I still hold on to this part of resentment for myself that, so many bad things have happened to me with individuals. Like I've had bad interactions that I felt, at some point betrayed and stuff like that, that it only made this shell around me that in order for me not to get hurt, I had to keep these walls up. And in order for me to like get things done, I had to rely on myself. And I'll kind of keep people at bay. And honestly, I do that with my family. I do it with people who start acknowledging me as their friends, and I have such a hard time saying like, oh, that's my friend, because I don't know, there's this part of me that's just been like holding it all back because I want to avoid feeling hurt, right? I want to avoid all that, and obviously that's not healthy, but
I would say this though, because this is the thing, and I tell folks this too with the walls, because they'll tell me about the walls. Sometimes they'll be like, I'm gonna tear them down, and I go, look, the walls are there for a reason. And that's totally cool. Keep the walls. The walls are protecting you. They're telling you something. But what you want to do, though, is you want to build a window and a door on that wall. So if you do see who's there and they feel safe to you, let them in. You don't want to build a wall to where no one has access. You want to build a wall to where certain people are not going to be good for you or don't want to love you or care for you. But there will be people who do. And that's the hard part. What you were saying is, how do we learn to do that? How do we learn what trust is? Because trust is a gift, right, that we give others, and we assess it based on people's actions, right? And so what you were just saying right now is, I always tell people, don't tear down the walls. They're there for a reason. People do hurt us. However, build your door and window and learn how to use it. Because when you do see someone there and you're like, you know what, this person has actually been there for me. They really care. I'm going to let them in. You are my friend. Right. And so I think that's so important too, to see these things as complementary to one another rather than, like I said, right, good or bad, healthy, unhealthy, because there's reasons. There's reasons why we do things, why we act certain ways. And really the work is understanding how these things can help us grow. Some people, they want to have that connection with others. They want to feel that love, but they've been hurt. And so I always tell them, yes, some people are going to hurt you, but not everyone is going to hurt you. There's going to be some people that don't. How do we differentiate that? How do we figure out a plan so what hurt looks like and what red flags are and what barriers are for you in opening up, but also limits and boundaries? And so that's, really the work that I do, is help people get those tools to understand, right, how to navigate these kinds of experiences. And I tell people this is one of those, like, almost like experiments where you have to put yourself in some of these moments to get through them, because you can't go over them, right? I worked with folks who experience a lot of different forms of anxiety, right? Even like social anxiety and going out. We've had the funniest experiments where I tell them, what's something you've been wanting? They're like, oh, I've been wanting ice cream, but I haven't gone because I just feel so like my anxiety, like being in this place and then asking people to try a flavor, like it bothers me. And I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be your homework. I'm gonna have you go, and you're gonna ask for 2 samples. They're like, no, Luis, I can't do that. Like, that's 2. Like, I can't even ask for 1. And I'm like, I want you to remember that, think about me being there with you. Think about someone that you care about being there with you, reminding you that it's okay, that you're allowed to ask for it. Even something as small as that, right? Yeah. And I had clients go. We've been on on the video, and they've got to ask for it, and then they're like, oh my God, that was intense. And and it's like I'm saying, it's because we're building that muscle, right, to get to these places. A lot of it is really about exposing ourselves to the discomfort and working through it and knowing that we're going to be okay. And that requires trust in ourselves. That requires us to feel, encouraged and motivated. And then also it requires us acknowledging that, it's not something we minimize, right? It's something we can work towards. So very similar to what you said. Don't tear down the walls. Learn about what it means to trust someone. What does trust look like to you? What does it mean for someone to be trustworthy? And are there people who do fit that bill? And are those the people that maybe it's okay to let them in a little bit more? Come in for a visit across the wall, right? Rather than like keeping them out completely, and then go from there.
Now that's a really powerful way to put it, because that gives you the control. It brings that control back. We don't have we don't have control over the external, but the internal is definitely something that we can work towards. And I think it's really eye-opening just to see, and humbling at the same time, that somebody with the experience that you have and somebody with the background that you've been through, like you're still human, and you take a few steps back every now and then, but you know how to work your way back into the position or further than you were. And I think that is, again, eye-opening to the listeners, because sometimes you feel like, and these individuals, like you said, have everything done and perfect. Their life is nicely put together. And then you feel a type of way because you're like, man, I wish I can be like that. Yeah. But you're humanizing yourself, and you're showing that this is part of the process. Yeah. And as long as you're open to the process, it's okay to have your setbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a valid point around social media and our perspectives, because it has shifted so much from years before, and I was going to say I graduated high school in 2004, like a long time ago, but I even before that, we didn't have phones like we do now. Yeah. I was still on AOL dial-up on my computer at home.
A messenger or
oh my God, I was, I'm that old, but the point is that, back then, you didn't really see people's lives. You didn't like assume that people were having a good time or like happy. And then social media came around, and people just constructed this very idealistic, very fantasy-like version of life, right? Where everything is highlights and pictures and nice moments. Yeah. But then we don't see what's really happening, right? And obviously it depends on who's sharing and why they're sharing. But what I'm getting at is that because that was the initial focus of social media, so many of us have a very distorted view of life and people being perfect, or people having everything or whatever, people not suffering. And it's like, no, like we're all human. We're all dealing with stuff. We all don't share certain things because it's personal. We all, are not going to see every dynamic side of someone's life. And so that's why I said, if something is inspiring you, take it. But the work is really moving away from this idea that, that is going to be what makes me worthy living like this, right? Because the work is internal. So I think that's also another very important piece, is recognizing the limitations of things, even like social media, right? I mean, part of work that I've done before, even with other clients, has been just getting them to go out and do things in person and meet people, because we've lost a lot of that, because of it. And I think the anxiety that so many of us experience from going on social media and seeing this bombardment of smiling faces, or even right now more of the news, and the crisis stuff. But we have to understand that really does directly impact us, right? Yeah. It's being like washed down on us. So I think it's just important for us to understand that, we're all human. We're all experiencing things. We're all responding to things. And there's going to be a lot of moments where it is very much our journey, right? Our hero's journey, as they say, of figuring these things out for ourselves, while also, like I said, tapping into resources, right, in the collective. But I think that's what I wanted to say about that we need to be very self-aware of social media, of what we consume, how we also idolize people, right? Celebrities, politicians, and put them on this pedestal, because I really think that has become one of the bigger challenges that I've seen, is seeking perfection in others, right? Whether it's Beyonce, whether it's, a big activist, whether it's whoever. And it's not that there's anything wrong with being a fan and loving people. I think what I'm saying is just more of recognizing that, that unrealistic expectation we place is going to disappoint us.
Exactly.
I think it's better for us to be aware of that, they're human as well, we're human as well, and we're trying to navigate our journey, and we're finding inspiration and motivation, and that we have to be very much in our bodies, right, and processing these things ourselves when we can.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the specific thing right now in regards to like the way we see individuals, you know, and we idolize them. And I may be completely wrong on this point, but I feel like as humans, right, as people, these social creatures, we've always, you know, as we've grown up, we always look for this figure or this, you know, it doesn't even have to be paternal or maternal, but just like this thing that is going to show us how we should live.
Yeah.
Because I think for the most part, we're also afraid of not fully living our lives or experiences as they should be. So we feel like we have to gravitate towards this idea of somebody who can show us the way. But in reality, a lot of the times, like you said, it's that inner work. Like if you're able to hold that value within yourself, and you don't even have to be doing huge things for your community, but just, you know, work towards being a better person and how you navigate your world. I think you, in some weird way, can start being an example of what that true experience can be like.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know, I wonder about that all the time. And even though I've done my reading and I definitely have had some research on it, the idea that humans naturally seek, like you said, some figure, right? Whether it's God, whether it's a celebrity, whether it's another person, constantly seeking something to represent a way of living, because we're not encouraged to live our lives.
Yeah.
You know, that brings me to a lot of the work that I've been doing the last 3 years on myself as someone that identifies as queer, as someone that has had to unlearn and grieve and navigate through, you know, old gender norms that I was taught, through religious trauma, through, you know, family trauma, all of these things, and had to really sit with myself and figure out, like, what life am I living? And is this who I am? You know, and I've made a lot of changes in the last 3 years. And what it's reminded me of is that I spent over 30 plus years trying to live and be exactly as everyone told me I should be. My parents, religion, my teachers, you know, friends, everyone. And I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
I was so unhappy because it wasn't what I wanted. It was what I thought would make me happy because everybody else told me that that's what it was. And when things fell apart for me and I was in a really awful place, that was the moment where I realized that I had been living life for other people and I was not happy. And I had to really let that go and be okay with understanding that if I lived the life that I was meant to and I was myself, that a lot of people would not be okay with that. Yeah. And that was painful. But I did it. I chose to be me. I chose to find things that brought me joy. I chose to live my life. And I have to say that I have never been as happy as I am today doing that. And yet it took time. You know, I actually had someone the other day, I was recording a podcast and they were like, you know, Luis, when I met you and I saw you, you're just walking, like you had this like confidence, you had this like you belong here, you know, like just this aura about you. And I told them, you know, that took me a really long time. I was a kid that was bullied. I was a kid that was told to stop acting or looking or doing certain things because it made me look this way, or you act like, you know, a girl or whatever. Lots of little comments like that you get as a kid, that I remember even just trying to change who I was to be able to be accepted and loved. And none of it worked. And, you know, going through that experience and then later on realizing how there was so much rage around that, so much anger around being rejected. And even though I tried to fit that mold, it still did not work. It was disappointing. And I think that's where that transition happened, that it was really through rage. It was through anger of being told that if I, you know, did these things, I'd fit in, and then still being told, actually, no, you're not good enough, you know, and then realizing that, well, if this is the reality, why am I wasting my time? Like, you know, these are not even people that want to be in my life or that are supportive or really loving if they, you know, see me this way. So like I said, you know, when that person said that to me, I thought about like, oh my gosh, all those moments where I kept myself quiet, all those moments where I shied away, all those moments where I didn't take opportunities because I doubted myself, because I didn't think that people were going to receive me well. All those moments where, you know, I still struggle even now when people come up to me and say, Luis, like, you know, I really appreciate you, or I love what you said, because I still have that there. It's a wound, and it doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop, not anymore, you know, like it used to, where I'd be like, I'm going to like go hide away or close off. It comes up, and then I'm like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. Like you're okay. And I think reminding myself of that just keeps me very much connected to the reality that, you know, the work that I do and what I try to put out there is not a solution. It's really an opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's an invitation for people to exist way beyond all those little things and rules and things that we're taught about existing, and to just be, and to find joy in that, and not to put that much pressure and unrealistic expectations on themselves. You know, so that goes back to what we were talking about, just how do we, you know, even show up for authentically for ourselves, right? It is work. It takes a really long time, because we have to get to a point where we realize that we've been surviving a certain way for such a long time that letting go of that survival, what it's provided for us, is terrifying, because you don't know what it's going to look like on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, what's your perspective on like the idea that, you know, for self-growth or for change, like adversity has to be part of it? Like, is that, do we always have to go through some challenge in order for us to find that part of ourselves?
You know, I got that question when you sent it to me, and I reflected a lot on it. And what I came to, and you know, and this obviously this is my perspective on it. Mm-hmm. What I said earlier about life, referring to the fact that none of us escape it. Yeah, we're all gonna deal with it. There's gonna be adversity for all of us in one way or another, because that's the cost of living. Yeah, that's the cost of existing and being in this world. That even if none of this happened and we were still back in our hunter-gatherer days, or we're still back in the indigenous world, like we still have to eat, we still have to survive, we still have relationships, we still have like to be, you know, somewhere and dealing with weather and natural. I mean, it's just a reality, right? That adversity is a part of living, and I don't think it's the reason we shouldn't want to enjoy it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's the reason why it should stop us, but I do think that it is a part of our journey. It's very different for each person. I want to say that I don't think we deserve to go through adversity, because if you ask me, Luis, do you want to go back through all the bullying, through all the rejection, through all the pain, I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to that. But I also recognize what you just said, that when I look back at it, I could see it as the thing that keeps me trapped and locked in, or I can see it as, you know what, Luis, like, that was you. That was you at one point, and you made it through, and you figured that stuff out. You figured out how to maneuver it, even at a young age, and you're here. And now you're doing this other version of yourself that feels more authentic, more aligned, because it's safer, because you built that for yourself. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't know if I would have gone to college to become a therapist. I don't know if I would have got my master's. I don't know if I would have, like, you know, dated my partner, done any of these things that have gotten me to a place where I have established safety for myself. You know, I get to decide if I want to have certain relationships or not, whether it's with family or other people, whether it is about you know, my friendships with the people I surround myself with, or how I put my message out there, even with fashion, right? Like who's I'm involving and who I'm letting be a part of it, and if they represent the values, right, and the goals that I have around representation, around self-expression, around embracing la cultura, all of these things. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't think I would be where I am. So what I say to people is that nobody wants to go through it. You know, and it's not that some of us have done something or that there's some magical sense. It's very much aligned with so many factors, right? That a lot of this stuff is out of our control. Some of it is in our control, and adversity is just a reality, right? And I think the anger stems from realizing that there's folks who have a lot of privilege, and you know, their adversity is different, and it's not fair. And I think that's also very valid. We can still be angry about some of these things, but in terms of adversity and, you know, things like loss and pain and emotions and hard times and being shamed, I mean, all of these things, or even natural disasters or dealing with life in general, like none of us get to escape. And the one thing that I always remind myself is everyone's going to die.
That's a fact.
And we're born, and we're going to die. And when I say that, it's because it's reminding us that that's where I think sometimes it's easier to understand that is the fair playing field, right, that we are going.
Yeah, you know, a few years ago, I was going through this emotional hardship, you can say, and at that time I felt extremely like isolated with what was happening with me. And, I've never had the best relationship with my parents, especially with my dad. And then while I was going through this, if I'm being quite honest, at the time I was going through this breakup. And to me, everybody goes through a breakup. But to me, through that relationship, I had my first son. So when all that happened, it felt like everything was just torn from me. I didn't know how to react. I didn't have any real support systems. So I felt like I was completely isolated. But it was in those moments that my dad, he kind of stepped up into the role of calling me every day and like asking if I was okay, if I was feeling fine, like if I needed anything. And even when I was in that dark hole, thoughts that sometimes it just felt easier to just quit, just quit this experience. I felt the connection, this real connection with my dad, in that he kind of helped me recollect myself and just see the value that I had within myself, something that I wasn't seeing. And it was a great shift within me where I started realizing again that I had to be open to the abundance of the love that was coming in me, because I think for a lot of people of color, it's hard to allow yourself to receive love. A lot of the time you want to help, you want to be the one helping out and being of service. But when it comes down to you kind of want to feel like you're being humble, like you said earlier, like, be humble, like you gotta be, appreciate what you got already. And because of that, for so long in my life, I was like, nah, I don't need this in my life, And through the years, I've learned that accept it, People want to help you. People want to show you that love. And, I mentioned the last episode, we ended it with the idea of love. I mean, love, sure, it's like that chemistry that you have between people, but it's also deeper than that. It's the value that you hold to yourself, to the people around you, and it transcends everything.
And that's such a beautiful story, and thank you for sharing, because I think a lot about how we're often toughened up, right, by our parents because they want us to navigate a world they know. I think that's something I also learned, in the last few years, was that they've experienced the world too. Humanizing our parents, understanding that they know how hard it can be out there, right? Obviously, it's not the same experience, like we said. There's going to be some differences, but the fact that like they toughen us up, right, for this desire to have us not be hurt, to have us not, not survive, right, and yet we've learned that there is so much power in vulnerability and connection. And like you said, that dark moment for you, having this individual, right, that maybe was not used to doing this, but realizing that that's what you needed and being able to connect that way, it made a difference. It made a difference. And that's what I tell people. It's like, being emotional, telling people you love them, shifting gears into like moving away from that mentality of survival. It's powerful too. And it does require a lot of strength for us to be vulnerable, for us to show up, for us to be in a space with someone where it's not just happy and celebration, but also painful, and having to process that. And so, like I said, adversity is something that we all experience, and definitely love is another part of that, right? Another side of this whole experience is knowing that it is very powerful and that it can help us. I've had moments like that too with my parents. My relationship with them is not perfect by any means. We still have a lot of boundaries and limits in place because of a lot of their beliefs in my, life. While at the same time, I also do know they love me, and they know that I love them. And love hurts too sometimes, And so I think that the best thing to do with it is understand that love in its complexity also means that we have to really sit with what's best for us. For me, it has been creating some distance while also knowing that that they are okay when I check in with either a sibling or, I reach out to them. But I also know some limitations because I've seen it, right, how much harm it's caused. And so it's challenging. I think especially for many of us first-gen children of immigrants, we have to quickly learn how to manage that duality, right, between them, our parents, and our, with their experience, and then our own experience, and the gift that many times we get from our parents, which is to live a better life. Yeah. And I think that, and I'll end it with this on this part, I think that oftentimes it's hard because our parents gift us this with an idea in their heads around what they think a better life is. But I think what they don't realize is that the actual gift they're giving us is the choice. to decide for ourselves and to choose what a better life looks like for us. And so I think they get scared because they couldn't imagine it for themselves. That hits me a lot when I think about it, because it gives me empathy for them, because I know all of their fear, all of their anger, all of their anxiety has been because they just wanted what was best for me, and they didn't understand that what they wanted that was best for me didn't align with who I am. And that's okay, because I've been able to do that for myself now. And so I always thank them for that, for, you know, having crossed borders and having left their family and having gone through the, process of being undocumented, for having to search for religion, for support, and for survival, because they gave me an opportunity to be here, to go to school, to build my life. And maybe our relationship isn't perfect, but it is rooted in gratitude. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, I'll have to sit with it when they're gone. And, you know, I hope that on both sides, that love was the one thing that was recognized, that we didn't have to understand each other 100% to know that we loved each other.
That was a beautiful acknowledgement of the sacrifice that they made. Luis, thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation with me. I have one last question. What's one thing that you would challenge listeners after hearing this conversation about something, you know, it can be small but meaningful, of how they can shift how they show up for themselves in their communities?
Yeah, I'm going to say that the best thing that you can do to really start that process is just sitting with it. You know, I think that's the one thing that oftentimes we avoid, is just like really sitting with it and really listening to what's happening, because we don't have practice in that. You know, we're so good at listening to other people sometimes. We're so good at wanting to help others that sometimes it's hard for us to have empathy and compassion for ourselves. So I always tell people, learn how to sit with these feelings. Like you were saying at the beginning, right? Learn how to sit with these emotions rather than run away from them. And also, what are the things that are coming up in those moments? Because that is very helpful, right? If I'm sitting there and everything that's coming to me is negative, where are they coming from? Where am I hearing these messages from? Whose voice is saying these messages? And are they true? You know, that has helped me so much to really sit with the feelings. And when I realized at first that a lot of my thoughts were very critical and very judgmental, I thought, oh my gosh, these were just all of the things that I heard growing up from so many different places. And I don't like how they make me feel. And I don't want to keep sitting with these things. And I think that was the moment where I realized, like, what do I need to do? And fortunately, through therapy, through a lot of the work that I've done, I've learned to be a lot more kind, compassionate, empathetic towards myself, accountable, which I think is a better word than us being critical of ourselves, is being accountable. If something is done that it does not align with our values, that we don't feel good about, how do we get better and grow from it, rather than just make ourselves feel like crap, because it's not going to do anything. And if we do have to feel like crap, fine, feel like crap. But then also, how do you get back up after that? Mm-hmm. Because we don't get stuck in feelings. We don't get stuck in time. So I encourage people to sit with these things. And if it feels uncomfortable, try to practice, a little bit more. What's coming up for me? And then start to find things that do heal you. Healing is lifelong. We don't often complete this kind of thing because that's not a reality. But what I do say to people is that there's lots of avenues to it, whether it's individual, whether it's therapy, whether it's community, whether it's art, whether it's, creativity, whether it's advocacy, whether it's just having a conversation with someone that you need it, like a parent. Yeah. All of these things heal us. Cultural practices, so many things that lead to us. There's no one answer. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just finding that and what works for you as a person, right? Detaching yourself from the idea that there is a secret recipe or secret way of doing this, and instead being okay with the messy and the human aspect of it.
Luis, thank you so much again for making the time for this episode. For people who want to find out more about you, about your show, about everything that's going on with you, where can people find you?
Yeah, so the main place is Instagram. My account is at Luis, Luis _the, THEE, like Megan Thee Stallion, and then _ LMFT. And that's where I post most of my stuff, updates on events, things like that. And my other big a contact would be my website, which is www.luis-cornejo.com. and my private practice website, which is www.psychosocialtherapy.com. And I do provide fully virtual services in the state of California in private practice. So that's also another option for people if they're interested in services and if they live in California. And then the final one is my what was the last one I had? Actually, no, that's it. Okay, I'm over thinking. I have some. Oh, my podcast. My podcast is Queer Magic Podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, and it's basically centered on really focusing on people's experiences and challenging a lot of the beliefs and things that we hold to help people find inspiration and encouragement. And that's going on right now. I'm in my second season, so second episode right now. So it'll be rolling out this whole year, 2025.
Please, everybody, make sure you tune in. Check them out, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And again, thank you so much for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And everybody else, thank you for listening to The Social Primate. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace.